1,419 visitors registered, and the numbers are increasing by the day from almost about 121 countries. And for this particular webinar, we have more than 300 plus delegates who have registered. As the lockdown is opening up and we are heading towards a new normal, it is important to follow all the precautionary measures to keep ourselves safe and follow the SMS guidelines, which is sanitization, mask, and social distancing. However, another important thing to combat this pandemic is to do more and more testing. Although in India, almost 2,15,195 samples have been tested as on June 24th, when you look at the tests per million globally, we are at a nominal 5,329. While in the US, you find it's 90,823, Brazil 12,948, Russia almost 1,22,000, and so on and so forth. However, the good thing is that with increasing number of COVID cases in the country, the government has started increasing the scope of testing, but we are still far away from the universal testing. To discuss more on this topical issues, we have an esteemed panel with us, and with great pleasure, I welcome our distinguished panelists, Dr. Shravan Subramanyam, who is co-chair FICCI Medical Devices Committee, Managing Director and of India and neighboring markets, Roche Diagnostics India. Shravan is also going to moderate the session later on. We also have with us Dr. Nivedita Gupta, Scientist F, Department of Epidemiology and Communicable Diseases, ICMR. Welcome, Dr. Gupta. We also have the eminent Mr. Suresh Wazirani, Chairman and Managing Director, Trans Asia Biomedicals Limited, a leader in this sector. Along with him, we have Mr. Vivekant Tripathi, Head Market Access and Institution Business, Biologics Zydus Group. Mr. Narendra Varde, General Manager and Country Head, Abbott Diagnostic India. Dr. Ravi Gaur, COO, Onquest Laboratories Limited. And an international speaker from Vietnam, Mr. Nim, who is the COVID-19 Project Director of Viet A Corp, International Business Director, GS Investments. Before we initiate the panel discussion, we would like to release the FICCI white paper on economical, accurate, and scalable solutions for testing. This white paper is an effort to establish the need for India's seroprevalence studies to base its pandemic management strategies and initiatives in the future as lockdown is getting lifted across the country. The report provides us with some keen insights into seroprevalence studies with diagnostic testing and how they impact COVID-19 management investments and plans for the future. May I request my colleagues to share the video? Can somebody inform me whether it's been done? Thank you. Thank you so much. FICCI has been at the forefront of government industry collaboration in managing the COVID-19 situation in India. This session is an effort in discussing testing strategies for unlocking India. Over to you, Shravan.
Thank you very much, Shobha. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, especially on the light of recent news that we've had around testing protocols. However, this comes with some sobering news that we do have in India, that we are hurtling towards 500,000 total cases and nearly 15,000 deaths. So this is something that is weighing very heavily upon all of us. And having said that, some of the ideas that we had right in the beginning of the pandemic still hold very true to today. And we want to talk about the role of testing in this pandemic. I was just reading the newspaper this morning, a very nice quote from Dr. Balram Bhargava, the head of ICMR, where he was saying, test, track, and treat is the only way to prevent spread of infection and save lives, and has been the approach used by our country till now. And I believe that still holds today as we are moving from different versions of lockdown to eventually unlockdown and looking at the economy as well. So lockdown 1 had kicked in with some relaxations. Now Unlock 1.0 has kicked in with some relaxations in terms of testing, and the goal is to make it widely accessible to many categories of people to understand the trends of the disease pattern. The lockdown had put a lot of pressure on the healthcare industry and various industries indeed, be it delivery of services, availability of PPEs, and so on. Relevance of diagnosis was not fully recognized until we started this whole thing in February and March, but from then it has really raced away and been the bedrock of our fight against the pandemic. Over the last 3 months, if you consider the timeline since March, we started off with a range of solutions, initially starting with RT-PCR and then rapid tests, lab-based tests, rapid antibody tests, antigen tests, and we've come to where we are now. We're also studying what's happening in other countries, not just in India and around us, but in the far west as well, and looking at various technologies that are being employed to increase access to testing, so that just as they are doing testing to understand the patterns of the disease in a population, but also the individual, to look at scalable solutions to address this. Before we move on to the panel, I do have a caveat that different tests serve different purposes. Some are diagnostic in nature, some are for monitoring purposes, and some are for seroprevalence. And we do need to consider any test in the context of the local prevalence as well as the medical condition that the individual presents with. And having said that, we have a panel of very experienced professionals in this space. We have Dr. Nivedita, who is joining us from ICMR. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us. I'd like to start with you, Dr. Nivedita Gupta. You have been really at the center of this whole issue with testing and the role that testing has for this pandemic. And ICMR has been at the forefront, issuing various guidelines and helping us understand this disease, understand the pattern, and also guiding us on the access to tests and different methods of testing that are available and that are recommended in different situations. Couple of days ago, ICMR also issued a very useful and pragmatic approach to maximize access to testing, and of course, there are different ways of adopting this in different states. Dr. Nivedita Gupta, could you share a little bit about ICMR's view on testing, what the journey has been over the last few weeks, and what you anticipate over the coming few weeks and months?
Yeah. Good morning, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak in front of this august audience. So if you look at our journey since January till now in terms of testing for COVID-19, it has been a very exciting experience and really shows the strength of the country in terms of rising up to the occasion. So in January, when we came to know about this new organism that was posing a threat to us, we by 21st of January, after the WHO released the testing protocol sequence of the virus, we were able to standardize this testing at National Institute of Virology, Pune, which is the apex institute of ICMR for all viral infections, research as well as diagnosis. Now, ICMR since the beginning has adopted a very calibrated approach for expansion of testing. And we have been very cognizant of the fact that we have to change the testing protocols as per the evolving scenario of the disease. So when we started in January, we were just looking at people who were coming from China, all the people who are returning from China, because we saw them as a threat. And our testing was limited only to one lab. But when we saw the first case in Kerala, then it was kind of a wake-up call, and we thought we'll expand our testing at least to areas where we have international airports, and we also have flights which are coming from China. So that's how we scaled up to a total of 13 labs. And fortunately, after the 2009 influenza pandemic that we had, which we all know as swine flu, we had worked extensively to strengthen the capacity for viral diagnosis in the country. Because before 2009, we had nothing. And when the pandemic had come at that time, we hardly had only an IV Pune who was well equipped to carry this kind of diagnosis. So ICMR's parent department, the Department of Health Research, we all worked together to set up a network of viral research and diagnostic laboratories in the country. And now when this pandemic struck, we had 106 laboratories which were ready in all parts of the country, which could take this kind of a challenging molecular diagnosis. So in February, we just picked up 13 of them, which were in areas where there were international airports and we had flights coming back from China. We scaled up the capacity. Since we didn't have any time for trainings, we went into a complete virtual mode. We trained them, we had daily VCs with them, and made sure that a quality diagnosis is being established at these centers, because we were very worried that any wrong diagnosis coming out of these laboratories will lead to national panic. But then as the disease grew and we had started seeing cases in Mumbai, we further expanded it to 30 labs, then in March 72 labs. And then when we saw that the disease is spreading all over, then we just scaled it up to the non-ICMR DHR laboratories. So we went outside the viral diagnostic system. And we use this platform to serve as training and capacity building platform for other medical colleges in the country. And that's how we moved out of the VRDL platform to the state government medical colleges. All the state government medical colleges were put in touch with the functioning VRDLs which we had, and they were trained there either through mutual exchanges or through VCs. Quality assurance programs were put in place, and we went into a full-blown capacity building mode all across the country. So whoever had the capacity for molecular diagnosis of the virus, we just picked up those laboratories from other science departments, from DST, DBT, CSIR, defense laboratories, the animal husbandry laboratories. So whoever came, the universities, but meanwhile, we have been very cognizant of that the biomedical waste disposal systems have to be in place. The people should be trained to handle human specimens, because we were very worried that we should not land up in laboratory outbreaks in this process of rapid upscaling. So taking into cognizance all those things, we have done due diligence with the laboratories and tried to scale up as much as we could. And in this process of scaling the number of laboratories, we have kept on increasing our testing criteria as well. So at one point of time when we had only international travelers, we also moved to include cases which were like the contacts of people who were lab confirmed case, followed by patients of severe acute respiratory illness. And then subsequently, we kept on expanding to include influenza-like illness, going into containment zones, advisories on pregnant women, pooled sample testing. We had advisories seeing the number of samples increasing in the laboratories. Then we also very recently came out with advisories for the containment zones, frontline workers. Then in the hospital setting, our recent antigen test advisory also focuses on pre-op screening of patients, as well as looking into or testing for COVID-19 in asymptomatic immunocompromised individuals as well. So if you see, the testing has been calibrated, the number of labs have been expanded gradually, as well as the testing criteria also has expanded. Then there was one more thing which we did quite extensively. The RT-PCR labs, they are very specialized labs. They require a biosafety cabinet. They have a specialized requirement in terms of waste disposal, handling of specimens. So and that limits the number of labs that you can have. And that also somehow limits the access to testing. So in order to improve the access, we utilize the TrueNat system, which was already in place for the TB program, the TrueNat system, as well as the Gene Expert machines, which were installed even at the district level, the primary health center level. The advantage of especially of the TrueNat system is that the system is designed in such a way that it poses minimum biosafety hazard. The buffer in which the virus comes is it inactivates the virus, and it's a closed system, so the chances of infection to laboratory workers are minimal. So we utilized this platform, and they came up with a COVID-19 cartridge, diagnostic cartridge. We quickly validated it within our ICMR system and put that in place so that at least the district level labs, the PHC labs, could start TrueNat based testing. And that was one major step that we took to increase the access to testing. We also tried to work with the rapid antibody tests, but somehow our experiences were not very good. We procured these test kits on the request of the state governments, but then the states themselves came back to us and said that the performance was not up to the mark. Then ICMR just withdrew on that part. But recently, almost 3-4 weeks ago, we came up with an advisory for ELISA-based screening of healthcare workers, frontline workers, containment zone testing. So we have been recommending the use of IgG ELISA test for screening of your frontline workers, healthcare workers, security personnel, whoever is there as a corona warrior, and also in containment zones where you could establish the seroprevalence of infection. You can also see who is recovered, who has been exposed and recovered to infection. And kind of you can think of putting these people back to work. So we came up with an advisory, we came up with an in-house ELISA kit, and also we have validated 4 kits as of now, and other US FDA based CLIA and ELISA kits are in market. We strongly recommend sero surveys through that, though we are not recommending any IgG assay as a diagnostic assay. They are a surveillance tool. And very recently, I'm sure you must have seen the advisory of ICMR on the use of the rapid antigen test. So this is something which we had been looking for a long time, because this the test that we have now recommended and has been deployed by 3 states, particularly Delhi, UP, and Haryana. That test is a diagnostic test, though the sensitivity is a little low, but the ease of use of the test in terms of not requiring any specialized machinery, it can be read with a naked eye in 15 minutes. And that is the way it has been propagated for use in containment zones. In Delhi, it has been used also. Now other states are deploying. So this is another way in which we have really tried to improve the access to testing in a very big way. The antigen test is being made available. We are also encouraging other manufacturers of antigen-based assays to come forward for validation. And we would be very interested in having more competitors for the antigen-based test. So the whole idea for the antigen-based test is to make it available as downstream as possible to improve the access for testing. And since the sensitivity of this test is low, there is a caveat that whoever is negative but symptomatic has to be backed up by an RT-PCR test. So this is how ICMR has been looking at the whole situation. The RT-PCR combination of RT-PCR, TrueNat, Gene Expert. We are trying to bring in the abort-based systems also, which are being used for HIV testing since a long time. We are working to use that platform also partially for COVID testing. And then bringing in the antigen test to improve the access. TrueNat, Gene Expert have improved the access, and IgG-based antibody tests. So that is our whole testing strategy. And if you look very recently, we have also invited the NABH hospitals to start testing for COVID-19 through the antigen-based tests. All the NABH hospitals, which gives a lot of handle for the private sector also to be very comfortable and initiate testing as much as they can. And further going ahead of this, we also have further plans of scaling up testing and opening it for various other sectors, but again in a very calibrated way, because the other important responsibility of ICMR is to be the national data source for COVID-19. So we are the single source of data entry. And while we are expanding testing, we are very cognizant of the fact that we have to get the data also for testing. Otherwise, nobody knows how many tests are happening, what is happening in the country. So that is our challenge in terms of expansion and simultaneously ensuring data comes. So that's all from my side as far as giving you a glimpse of the journey that we have gone through. And I'm happy to answer any questions as and when they come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nivedita. This is really, really fascinating to hear the inside story of all the effort that you and your team at ICMR have been putting in, and we really look up to you for this direction. I will come back to you a little later to ask about your thoughts on how states are executing it at a local level. You spoke about, last mile access. You also spoke a little bit about making this accessible to various categories of individuals and perhaps thinking about how it might help to get people back to work. So we would love your thoughts on that. And especially given that, while the lockdown was certainly successful by whatever measures we have been studying in slowing down the curve, it has impacted the economy severely. And analysts have estimated a GDP contraction of anywhere from 5 to 10%. And so this is where healthcare policy and economic policy are coalescing, and we need to take that very calibrated approach that you spoke about. And it's also very clear that we as an industry, healthcare industry and beyond, are much stronger together. And with that, we have a panel which includes leaders from the private sector, also from the public sector, from Indian manufacturers, global companies, and we also have an eminent speaker from a foreign country who's going to be sharing the experience in Vietnam. So now with access playing on all our minds and trying to find ways to get maximum tests across to a maximum number of people, I'm going to turn to my good friend Narendra Vadde. He's the country head of Abbott Diagnostics, and Abbott has been playing a pivotal role in this in the fight against this pandemic. And Narendra, you were in the news yesterday talking about the technology and your goal to make this widely accessible. So could you share a little bit about the context there and what the plans are?
So, Shravan, thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for your participation in this webinar. I would also like to thank Vicky for organizing this. This is a great platform for all of us to get together and share our views. Dr. Nivedita, I think you very beautifully summarized all the different types of testing, that we have available now in India, and especially the guidelines released on the 23rd of June for all of them together. So that was nice to see. And one phrase over there, which is very important, Shravan alluded to it as well, the test, track, and treat. Right? I think that's absolutely critical in a market like India and all countries globally also, where we've seen them flattening the curve. I think it's been when the testing has been scaled, you get to know how many people, more people, are diagnosed with it. You understand how the epidemiology is progressing. So it's great to see that it's opening up now even to the private sector, and a lot more different types of testing are included. And hopefully going forward, we also look at multiple different protocols of PCR with antibody testing, how that also together could potentially help. In terms of the access, I would just like to say that Abbott has been in India since 1910, right? So it's been a company entrenched in India for a very, very long time, more than a century. And it's been committed to India. It's been committed even with this fight. India was one of the first wave one countries where we wanted to bring the product in because we understand with our dynamics, with our population, Abbott does understand the support that needs to be given over here. So we are committed to ICMR, to the Government of India, to the Ministry of Health to support in whichever way we can. And I think in terms of the scale-up, we have such a huge country, so many different states, districts, and so many people that need to be tested. So I do feel there is a place for everyone, right, from your PCR NAT to ELISA-based testing, to CLIA-based testing, to antigen rapid. There's a play for everyone, given our infrastructure, logistical challenges, how spread out some places could be. So with that, I feel it's also the time when everyone needs to come together. The government, the state, the industry in general, whether it's the local Indian companies, whether it's multinational companies, whether it's indigenous layers, need to get this point to fight through this pandemic. And that's where the collaboration of everyone together is the only way we're going to see us, getting through this. And that's where, as I'm repeating myself, but I think the last guidelines that were shared, I think they're excellent because it also starts opening up the private sector, and we need to keep testing more people to clearly understand who we are treating, how do we manage lockdowns, how do we manage containment zones, and that important analysis information can only come through once enough testing is done.
Thank you, Narendra. Excellent points, and I believe you're speaking for all of us from the IVD industry when you're talking about how we can deliver access. And the FICCI white paper does speak about the points that you mentioned, and I invite members of the audience to download it and take a look at it because it can help you with the guidance that you might need to understand these protocols. Now, Narendra also spoke about the private sector getting involved, and in India, we have a very vibrant private sector in the diagnostic space, and we're fortunate to have a couple of speakers who will be addressing that later downstream. But first, I turn to Mr. Suresh Vazirani. For me personally, it's been a pleasure to know you for the last 30 years, I think, from my school days. And from those days, I have known you to be an innovator. You have never sat still and constantly been pushing the boundary on technology as well as access. Now, I know better than to ask you scripted questions because you have such a wide array of topics that you can talk about. But I do want to ask you a couple of questions about the recent news that we've seen that, Transasia in a very short span of time has developed a new test which can enable wide access across the geography in India. You have probably the widest footprint of diagnostic solutions across India. You're manufacturing here. We also saw this very nice article about a mobile lab concept, which I think can help us deliver access to the far-flung areas where we may not be able to find other sources of testing. So, Mr. Vazirani, if you could share a little bit about your experience in the last 3 months specifically, but also, of course, which has been drawn on your several decades of experience, and your advice to us and how we can all work together, how we can ensure the best testing approaches that can eventually help us be stronger, both from a health and economy standpoint. Mr. Vazirani.
Thank you, Shravan. It's very nice to be here on this panel. I think it's very important what we are discussing for the country. I don't know how many of us realize that we are living through a real historical time of our country. 10 years, 20 years from now, when you look back what happened in India, I think these days will be very significant. Why? Because I feel that the way the whole country has responded, the private industry, the government organizations, the hospitals, healthcare, entrepreneurs, I think it's amazing. As Dr. Nivedita Gupta said that in about 4 months' time, the country has increased the testing labs from 1 to 1,000. I mean, where in the world can you do that? That within a span of 4 months, your testing capability goes from 1 lab to 1,000 labs. And these are not just any lab. These are properly equipped, properly trained labs. So this is amazing and something that we can be proud about. As our Prime Minister says, that Atmanirbhar Bharat, I think that is the key. Unfortunately, India has shown that Bharat can be Atmanirbhar. As you mentioned, Shravan, about the formula is the test, track, and treat. So everything starts with testing. The whole Ramayana starts with testing. So testing is the key. And as I mentioned, that going from 1 lab to 1,000 labs is amazing. But still, India is a large country. I think we have about 700 and odd districts. You will know better exact number. And we have all the big cities, but 70% of India lives in the outside the big cities. What happens to those people? I feel that is the real challenge, that all the technology we have, all the modern testing facilities we have, how do we take it to the 70% of our country people who are outside our accessible world as we know? That's a tier 2, 3, and no tier towns, villages. How do we take it there? Initially, there were not many cases in those places. Not many COVID had not reached. But because of the return of over 1 million, what we call migrant labor, the COVID has also reached those places. So even in small towns, you find 50, 100, 200, 300 cases. And without adequate testing facilities, to some extent, we are shooting in the dark. So we don't really know how many cases are out there. This is where we took up the challenge with AMTZ of making the mobile lab. To expect every sample to come from a village to every big city for testing, it's not practical, because it's a question of logistics, the time. So in about 2 months ago, we said, this is what we need. And fortunately, in less than 1 month, we could bring it on the road. As you know, last week, we launched it in Delhi. And this is not just any lab. This is a full-scale BSL-2 with proper biosafety standards, full lab for infectious diseases. Of course, right now it is meant for COVID, but this lab can do any infectious diseases. It can do TB, it can do hepatitis, HIV, viral load, you name it, and it can do. So it's a full-fledged, like other 1,000 labs in terms of the capacity. It can do ELISAs, it can do rapid tests, the full gadget, And I do believe that we have in the country 5,650 talukas. And taluka is not a small place. Typical taluka has a decent population surrounded by about 200 villages around it. So I do believe that 500 iLabs, mobile labs like this, can make sure that we can take the testing technology to every village doorstep. I think that sounds ambitious, but very doable, very practical way of taking modern technology testing to every single village of the country. As I mentioned, that we have a lot of interest from various states. We are hoping to be able to put about 50 mobile labs in next few weeks out on the road. And I think before too long, we will be able to achieve our goal of having 500 mobile labs to cover 5,650 talukas of India. So this is a very key factor. As I said, 70% of the population, which is for a large country like India, you're talking about 800 million people. That's more than whole of Europe put together. So Shravan, I think this is something that building our capability in the big cities and then taking it to the rest of India is the key. And I'm glad that we have a small part in that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Vazirani. I invite you to consider moving it up from 500 mobile labs to 739. I think that's the number of districts that we have. And I think as a healthcare community, we stand in support of this mission to access every single taluka. And we'll come back to this a little bit later. I also want to invite the audience to start typing down your questions in the chat box. For any of the panelists who've already spoken or who might speak. We will be opening it up to questions a little later, but I still have some specific questions. Now I'll turn it to Dr. Ravi Gaur of OnQuest. Ravi has been a voice of reason over the last several weeks and months, and many of us in the industry turn to him because he sits at the confluence. He is one of the people that is dealing directly with patients, and also he understands the lab business and he understands a little bit about the in vitro diagnostic space. Ravi has been a proponent of public-private partnership as a means to scale up access to testing, and he's also got some expertise in understanding different types of tests. So Ravi, if you could share with us a little bit from your diagnostic chain experience, what is the role of the private sector diagnostic labs to scale up? As we agreed earlier, I think we all believe we are stronger together, and we do need a clear government framework, and we are supported very much by the private sector also as a force multiplier. So do tell us a little bit about all of the private sector, different methods of testing, and also, if I may push you a little bit, being a doctor, you are probably in a better position to advise many members of the audience who are anxious about getting back to work, about unlockdown. What is your advice, or what is your caution to them on what we can do to unlock down using testing?
Good morning, everybody, and I think thanks, Shravan, for putting these very important questions, which are in everybody's mind today. In fact, I deal with the common man every day, in and out, and for information, probably the Delhi government or probably maybe the ICMR or somebody has put my name also in the helpline. So I keep getting the calls all throughout the day, and all kind of patients they're stressed out, even they're not in contact, or they're suffering, or there's somebody with comorbidity. But it's I think a very hard time for everybody, and I think learning for me also, but handling those anxious mind, that's been a very tough challenge I think all of us are facing. So let me start with what you're saying, as we move down from lockdown to unlockdown, I think I like to say it's and we were talking about 3 months back, testing is a norm, and today still we talk about testing. So 3 months back, we never had much of an idea of what to test, where to test, and whom to test, because that was hardly, somewhere in February, March, there was very few technologies, whatever the labs, or even the guidance, and probably the experience from the world, which was translating and evolving. And so I still, being a diagnostic person, I feel that lockdown, unlockdown, I think unless you do testing, and which is being now scaled up to a massive scale, even 1,000 labs, we will be able to definitely knock down the virus. It's important to do that, because I think more and more mobile labs, more and more technology, and this is where I think the future lies. Because unless you test, you can't track. Unless you track, you can't treat in the time. And early diagnosis is the answer, probably, for this facing the coronavirus. Now, I would like to thank the government authorities here. Probably they have health authority. They've done a wonderful job in a short span of time. Even, I mean, the ICMR specifically, they have come out now. Nivedita has explained to us all technologies in a short span of time, with so much of restrictions and limitations. But and then something which the whole direction and the strategy and the various technologies paper which came about a couple of days back, that's a real good help for the private sector, and of course the entire healthcare industry. Then I think if you start with, probably I'd say we are talking about various technologies. First and foremost, we had RT-PCR. That's the only diagnostic test as of today. And the challenge with RT-PCR is it is not an easy to set up. You require skill, you require biosafety cabinets, you require the RT-PCR equipment, we require the right kind of you can say accreditations and regulations, and of course the control, because otherwise, the way I was saying, we need to be talking about the data, because you have to be actually the integration of all put together. So the first thing was RT-PCR, and I think that hurdle now we have overcome. Now many more labs have come forward. NABL has put in a very good work. They are now even setting up giving an accreditation within 1 week's time, and that's a good progress we have moved in. But again, the challenge in RT-PCR is the sample collection, sample transportation. There has the testing time. It's not something probably, although the guidelines say 24 to 48 hours, somewhere we are hearing the reports are still coming in 3 days. So even 24 hours is an anxious time, because some patients come today, give me the sample, and then they go back home, and then they come back tomorrow. We don't know if the patient was positive, what will happen in 24 hours. He must have already transmitted to somebody. So I think the important factor was to bring down the timing of RT-PCR, and that's with RT-PCR, it's a technology and this infrastructure, the cost of the region. I think all this, this is getting difficult to offering RT-PCR at every nook and corner. So definitely there was a need for alternate technologies, and how do we do that? Then we had, after that, the rapid card test, probably that's gone bust, probably. I think it was probably not validated. We had IgG antibody. But I think the next important thing which came was the serology antibody. I think this is one, I can come back to serology a little later before what we come to the next technology, which was a couple of days back, was rapid antigen. Rapid antigen is actually one of the probably going to play a very important role. And the most important role today will be, to my mind, is because I see the direct patient talking about. Because when the apprehension is scared, they want a report right away. So I think if you can, because I'm saying it's about 60% sensitive and 100%, 99% specific, there is some issues out there, but still, we will be able to, in a strong case who's a direct positive is positive. And then somebody gets to know, oh, I am positive, the immediate action, whether it's isolation or quarantine or treatment, everything is start within minutes. It can be a big help for acute emergencies, where the hospitals were struggling whether to touch the patient or not touch the patient. The authorities were trying to put across guidelines that you need to admit all cases, and doctors are working hard to save their own lives and to save the patient's life. The antigen will definitely, some scare will not be full, but it's not some role will definitely play. This is not, if the negative symptomatic, the RT-PCR, you go back to that again. Then I think yesterday also you must have seen some advisory has come in Mumbai, actually, for the same mission, the same Mumbai kind of advisory, which even sees the old age comorbidity patients who are actually not been able to go out 70 years and old age people, they can actually take this care at home and do it by themselves. I think that's another important people who are comorbidity, immunity is compromised, and then they can't go out and they are scared, they don't know, although they kept themselves safe, but still they want to know. The rapid antigen probably will help out in that case. Now, coming to another important thing which is now coming out is serology antibody. ELISA is another one part of COVID, but I think I'll touch base more into serology, which is, I think, important tool for all of us. And it should be, if it is practiced in the right way, and now the ICMR is already approved, there are multiple, the Roche itself, the Abbott, and then multiple, I think there are about 200 more commercial antibody testing, but I think only about 25 to 30 are actually in practice, and a couple of, I think 5-6 of them are really going to be a very important role because the availability in India. So those are, I think, important for, I suggest that antibody from the RT-PCR is one. I think they should be done probably used for the day one at the baseline level. They should be done even at the 10th level or even the 10th day. They can even, because they will continue, IgG levels probably of the antibody serology will keep going up, and probably this is almost more 10 weeks. So to do the sero surveillance, or probably get to know, understand the epidemiology of the society, and that's what the ICMR guidelines mentioned yesterday. all stay for yesterday. You can do in malls, you can do in shops, you can do even healthcare settings. That's the healthcare guys are exposed every day, and now you can't be doing RT-PCR every day on them. So you can probably day 1, day 10, day 14, day 30, and this advantage of this platform is fully automated, and I think we have equipments which can CLIA-based equipment or across India, probably many of the labs. There are thousands of instruments are actually across. So we really can. This should be utilized, but it should not. It's not a diagnostic test. Yes, that's an important word of caution. One should take care, but it should be definitely, weaved into the entire system, because RT-PCR maybe on day 1, followed with a baseline, followed by serology on day 10. After that, probably follow it up. Not only that, and then as when we grow, probably you can be able to say for the plasma therapy patient who are going to be donors, which is now become almost one of the successful the model for treatment, and people are adopting and they're growing. We still have to know more of the results, but still then the blood donors, blood groupings. I think in all areas, I think the antibody, I think testing protocol has to be weaved in. Although today we have independent protocols for everything, RT-PCR, antigen, but I think a new protocol should be developed, I feel, and which I think ICMR is doing, and they're more or less explained yesterday and in the document 2 days back. This is where you can use. But a protocol clinically is now developing and should be there in the areas where even ELISA is also playing an important role, because somewhere the instruments are not there. ELISA is another good technology. So I think that's where we stand today in terms of diagnostic technologies. But then there are the disadvantages. I've spoken so much about the serology. I think I like to take some word of caution here, because it could be, the values could be on assay dependent, kind of assays we are using. It could be a seronegative in immunocompromised patients. Immunity is not developed. Then severity of the illness, probably somebody is most immunity, because the immunity is not developed, IgG may not have come forward, and you still feel awesome. Or it could be it could be a cross reaction with SARS virus, I think. So we need to be very specific about the kind of serology or the antibody test we're using, but look into the cross reactivity. If there's activity, then the whole purpose will be defeated. To my understanding, the good companies like Roche, Abbott, and those couple of more, they have almost no cross reactivity out there, and that's going to be probably a good. Similarly, for the RT-PCR, I think the more important part is the sample transportation, the type of sample collected, and then the way it reaches the lab in the cold chain. I think these 3 then are very, very important. And what is last point I'd like to say is, because I think there is a still need of expanding molecular RT-PCR technology to nook and corner to every, probably, because the day that these have come from developed countries to developing countries like India, then to the metros and urbans, and then the, of course, urban rural space and the rural space. So how do we get to know RT-PCR testing and reporting as fast as possible? So it's time to develop a collection center model where we will have multiple collection centers across India, where samples can be collected at probably like every 4 or 5 kilometers. And then the logistic networks, I think it's by surface, because we have good trains like 8 hours, 6 hours, specific buses, specific trains, or maybe require chartered helicopters or flights. The sample can reach designated locations. These, I think, with probably private player industry can definitely be a big role into this. And government is, of course, join hands, and we are ready to support all across, and they are working on it. If you develop a collection center model and a very efficient logistic model, the sample reaches the testing lab within 4 to 6 hours to 8 hours. You can give the reports in 24 hours very fast. And then, of course, parallelly, there's rapid antigen testing. So you have a rapid testing, you have your antibody testing to follow up afterwards. Then you have a group or community study to be done in ELISA and the studies. I think all this put together will definitely help us to scale up the capacity, and of course deliver what is best needed for the India. This is what I like to add. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ravi. And the audience has already heard it from Ravi. His cell number is publicly available in case you have any doubts. But having said that, Ravi, sincerely appreciate the way you've laid it out for us. various testing technologies are available, the role of the private sector to help with access. That is the key word, especially now, since the ICMR's new guidelines are talking about expanding access to testing for various categories. As you mentioned, it could be in the workplace, it could be for healthcare workers, and it's important to know which test you're taking because different tests serve different purposes, as Ravi pointed out. And he also mentioned that we need to be cognizant of the sensitivity and specificity, and accordingly understand which test can be used for what purpose. So talking of scale, we also have a few examples of serology testing being deployed at scale. Recently, we read that Singapore has procured, I think, hundreds of thousands, if not million plus serology tests for a population of just 5 million. And we have examples from the UK, which we've read about in the news, 10 million plus serology tests. The US, within days of serology tests being available, there was an uptake of 20 million. And if you compare that with the population that we have here and the disease trends of this pandemic, which is still growing, we need to find ways to contain this. We need to find access to testing, and we all need to come together. Here we have a pharmaceutical company that has forayed. It's not new for a pharmaceutical company to foray into diagnostics, but would love to hear the views of Vivek from Zydus Cadila. Zydus is a very well-known name in the pharmaceutical space. They're major exporters and they have a fantastic presence across India. And they were one of the first companies to step up for localization of this important test. So Vivek, could you share with us a little bit about your experience in this journey, what you have learned, what you would advise, and really the importance of the serology test in this journey? Vivek Tripathi.
Thank you, Shravan. Good morning to everyone. And I would like to start from the quotes which has been quoted by Mr. Vajirani and very well articulated by Dr. Nivedita Gupta, where the calibrated efforts have already been taken in creating the access of different testing strategies or different testing methodologies at various levels. Zydus has been in pharmaceuticals and vaccines since long and is one of the top pharmaceutical companies in the country, among top 5. And we entered into diagnostic space with the intent of providing the complete solution, right from diagnostics to preventive with vaccines to treatment through therapeutics to wellness through our OTC portfolio. So that was the intent, and we started with seroprevalence, and you can say that surveillance diagnostics. And we were the first company to enter into a public-private partnership with NIV and ICMR, where we launched some of the serosurveillance diagnostic testing kits in 2018 for some of the very localized demographic diseases like KFDV, CCHF, and we have been, I think, quite helpful during the time of Nipah when it got spread, although these kits are not very well documented in our current surveillance diagnostic guidelines of IDSP and Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. But I'm sure that the way efforts are being done, it will certainly find its space. And these are quite important to know that how the disease spreads and where it comes from, so that it could be contained well in time before it becomes a scale of pandemic rather than from a demographic level. So we have been into this serosurveillance space, and we tied up with ICMR for launching this IgG antibody ELISA kits. And as you know, this seroprevalence is an independent indicator of knowing that how the disease is spreading and where do we stand in time of curve of pandemic. So it is quite important to know that how we are doing and where the disease stands in a particular time frame. So it tells us that what is the immune response and let us know that what is the qualitative and quantitative dimensions of the disease. So IgG ELISA rapid kit, which we launched in association with ICMR and NIV, right now is meant for only serosurveillance studies. And I am sure that everyone would have gone through recently published guideline of ICMR 23rd of June, where I think the first time I have seen that it has been quite comprehensive. Otherwise, most of the guidelines has been in isolation, either on RT-PCR or on antibody or on some other testing parameters. But this has been quite comprehensive, where it has been put all the testing strategies in one guidance document, which certainly gives a complete visibility to all the people who would like to do, whom to test, how to test, when to test, and what do you expect from a particular test. So that is, I think, I'll say a very comprehensive document which has been released on 23rd of June by ICMR. Because since last 20 days, since we have launched this kit, we have been getting a lot of questions from a lot of hospitals, even the government agencies who might have not been aware of what these tests would be doing. They have been getting the news that their test has been launched by a company, and we should jump on this test and get this test as soon as possible in their lab. But it is not like that. So serosurveillance has till now been into the control of government, and they have been doing it. But I think on 23rd of June onwards, it has been extended to some of the private hospitals so that they could also know the seroprevalence in their healthcare workers, or maybe all the corona warriors whom they would like to test and find out that who could be put back into the workplaces with the complete workforce availability at their workplaces. So our objective for getting into this space is also to create better access, as Mr. Vajirani has been saying, that we would also like to make sure that it reaches to the bottom pyramid of the society, that all the 5,400 plus talukas we have. So, and any testing, like say in India, like we have, I think, multiple manufacturers, we might not be able to provide complete access going at that level because everything is in limited quantity which is available. Like antigen is not freely available, so is positive control, and negative controls are not available freely in that quantity where you can make the access to that level where it reaches the last mile. So we are also working on to develop some recombinant models so that it could be scalable to any limits. We have already deployed some robotic arms which can make sure that quantities could be manufactured at any scale as the country needs, because seroprevalence and seroprevalence are normally the epidemiological studies which are being done on large scale, and that only makes sense. On 100, 200 samples, it doesn't make any impact, and it doesn't make any good reason to do it, because it doesn't give any kind of needs to the people who are doing these tests. So large scale epidemiological studies with the serosurveillance tools like ours will certainly help the policymaker also to make the right interventions into the healthcare delivery chain. And maybe when the vaccines are also on the maybe last quarter of the year, or maybe first quarter of next year, I'm sure that these IgG kits will play a very important role to find out that how effective these vaccines are going to work. So that is the intent of ours, to be a partner with the government, entering into a public-private partnership and taking to the level of where we can create the access to the last mile. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vivek. Very, very helpful, and still so amazing that you were able to turn around this test kit at such short notice and make it widely accessible. We heard from Vivek that serosurveillance and seroprevalence studies at scale is critical for the authorities to understand the pattern of the disease. So let's see what we can do as an industry to facilitate this and cooperate with the government. We also heard from Vivek that the results from these serology studies can help with the development of a vaccine. Thank you so much for that. Now I'm going to turn it to Mr. Min, who's joined us from Vietnam to share his experience where his organization works in close collaboration with the government. And from my own colleagues at Roche in Vietnam, I'm given to understand that the country has gone through several days without a new infection. And so the story of Vietnam in containing this curve and managing this disease is very special. And we'd love to hear from you, Min, a little bit about your experience in this journey in Vietnam and what we might be able to learn and apply in our country. Min?
Yes, thank you. This is our honor so that I have chance to rejoice this meeting. From very first time, I would like to tell you some good news that it is 70 days. Consequently, in Vietnam, there is no case of infection in the community. 70 days in the street. And at this moment, by the data today, in Vietnam, totally from very beginning, since we are very close to China, we are one of the first country to get the first infection. But at this moment, we only have a 352 case of infection for all of the time, about the 6 months. Since we are very, very close to China, we are very vulnerable for all sorts of infection, but we can manage this very well. And at this moment, there is 0 case of death which been recorded by us. And I'm very sure that this is a special case in all over the world. And based on the purpose of this webinar, I would like to share to you that the role of the testing strategy so that help us to prevent this COVID pandemic in Vietnam. Okay, as far as you know, Vietnam is a country with nearly 100 million people. And as you know, that our healthcare system and our resources are not advanced compared to all other countries, such as Singapore or Korea or even China, we cannot match to them. So that we understand that if that bad situation happen, there's no way that the healthcare system of Vietnam can cover. That's the reason why then all of our government and all our citizens understand that this is a battle of the whole country. And we consider that to fight with the COVID is just like to fight with the enemy or we enter the war. That's why that from the top person of the government to someone that even that he cannot read the newspaper, but if you ask them, they can know very well what is the COVID disease, what is the symptom, and what they should do when they have those kind of symptoms. Even some of them maybe cannot read very well. So this is the first thing and the first reason that we can stop the disease by we let everybody know about if it's happened, how serious is it. The second thing is that when there are very, very first signal from China, we already noticed, and all of the Ministry of Health and all of the scientists already work together and think about what is the scenario and how Vietnam can prevent the disaster happen. From very, very first case in China when it is confirmed by WHO. And as you know that we are very, very few countries who respond for all of the recommendation from the WHO when the bad thing happened, even in advance. Yes. And the second thing is that when we have identified the suspect case, we will try to zone in them. We divide the patient into the F0, which means the one who already infected. The F1, which is the one who has contact and have a very, very high risk, so that we will quantify them. The F2, which means is the one that who already contact with the F1 and the F3 also. And since that we are divide the category of risk of the infection into those kind of variation, so that we can quarantine them and make sure that the infection will not be spread in anywhere else. And this is the second thing. And the third thing that about the testing, that we very, very open for all of the new technology in all over the world. We have a team, project team, that with all of the best scientists in Vietnam, with all we try our best to recognize for all the best technology in the world, even PCR or antibody or antigen or something like this, so that we test and we compare and we choose which one is suitable for Vietnam to prevent the disease. And based on the discussion, we know very well that since we try our best to minimize the case, so that the accuracy and the sensitivity of the test is the key for success in Vietnam to prevent the disease. That is the reason why we get all the tests in the table. And one of the best things that Vietnam can produce the test. My company, VietAI, is the one that will provide 90% of the test kit in Vietnam for 250,000 tests in Vietnam right now. And as you know that with 250K of tests, we already detect more than 350 cases. That means that the percentage of detection is about 0.13. This is very, very high in all over the world. And since that, we always try our best to compare our tests in sensitivity and accuracy with all the tests. So that is the reason why we can detect and prevent with the most accuracy way. And as Roche knows very well, that Roche is one of the first company which create the ready-to-use test kit, PCR test kit, which means that no need any kind of further mix or something like this. And VietAI is the one that understand this is very good in Vietnam, because that in Vietnam it's just like India. Then we are very new with the PCR, and it's very hard to train the people how to mix that. And if we can provide the ready-to-use test kits so that we can save time in all kind of training and also testing, that is the reason why then product. And as you know that Vietnam is not a very, very rich country like all the country in the world, so that we understand our limitation. And that's why then we will try the best to make sure that the case is minimum as possible, and we give the access for all of everybody, even they are the citizen of Vietnam or the foreign citizen in all over the world. If they have any symptom or they have some trouble, they can contact to the nearest facility of healthcare, and so that we will have them to treat, to evaluate, and to test to identify if they are the one who infect or not. And we provide free of charge for all of the cure. As you know that we already spent a lot of money for the pilot in England. It's very famous in the newspaper right now. And the money we spend, we just want to make sure that there's no death in Vietnam. And this is our proud. And this is the thing that some kind of the boss to our spirit in Vietnam, to ensure that we will have no one left behind. And this is the spirit of Vietnam, so that we can fight against this COVID disease. And when the things like this happen 70 days with no infection in the community, even the infection case from Vietnam still increase, because there are foreigner people, or some kind of Vietnamese who come back into Vietnam, but we still treat them very well. We also provide airplane for citizens of Vietnam in foreign countries, so that they can come back to Vietnam safely with the better treatment. And that is the reason why then everybody in Vietnam understand very well about the importance of the testing, and they're willing to test. In my case, even in VietAI case of experience, I know that there are some people, they come from the rural area. They go to the city and they say that, okay, I think that I'm infected, so that please help me to check something like this. And that's helped a lot on fixing this problem. And with India, I'm listening that all people here that already have India to have better assessment for the test in in the scale, which I think is very, very hard, extremely hard to do that in the scale of the nearly billion of citizens like India. And in the behalf of Vietnam, I want to wish you very best luck in the fighting of this cow disease. This is what I want to share with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Min. Indeed, we are stronger together, and we sincerely appreciate hearing your story from Vietnam, the role of testing in helping to manage this disease and contain it and not have any new documented infections in the last couple of weeks. That is just fantastic. No one left behind. I think this is a good motto for all of us to follow. We have about 20 minutes left in this program, and we've already got a few questions coming up. In the meantime, let me please remind you that FICCI also has several publications that can help you, your organization, in thinking about what you need to do to return to work, not just with testing, but various SOPs, protocols that you can follow for your office. So please do take a look at that. And let me start the questions. We have Sharan Krishna. She's asking some technical questions, perhaps best answered by Dr. Nivedita or Dr. Ravi Gaur. Has the viral load to identify a carrier state been quantified? And another related question to that is how many variants of the RNA have been identified? So Dr. Nivedita, if you could share with us if there's any information on the degree of virulence of the different mutations, and also have we estimated the viral load required to identify a carrier state? Dr. Nivedita, please.
Yeah, so I'll explain the question on viral load first. So the kind of spectrum of disease that we are seeing for COVID-19, there are asymptomatic infections, there are mild infections, moderate infections, severe infections. So when you look at the viral load in all these four different spectrum of disease, it doesn't mean that somebody who is asymptomatic would essentially have a low viral load. There have been asymptomatic infections wherein the viral load has been much higher than people who are seriously ill. So here we should understand that even a lot of host factors are there which lead to the severity of the disease, and the factors which are responsible for worsening of a person are also related to the cytokine storm, which is very much there and resembles the dengue viral infection. So a lot of host factors are there which are interplaying with the virus and causing severe disease. So direct correlation of the viral load with severity of disease as of now, we have not witnessed, and I don't think it exists. And it doesn't have to do much with the person being asymptomatic or mild symptomatic. Somebody who is asymptomatic or mild symptomatic can have a much higher viral load as compared to people who are severely ill. So that kind of a correlation still has not been established. If you talk about the mutations in the virus, though there are different forms of virus, there is a central repository known as GISAID, which is a world repository where people are depositing the sequences of this virus, where three different clades of this virus have been reported. But more or less, if you look at the genetic evolution of this virus, it does not seem to be a highly mutating virus. Like whatever we see in influenza virus, that it mutates every year, there is a new strain, we are always looking for a new vaccine. So this virus seems to be relatively stable, and that is why the whole world is running after a vaccine, because it is thought that if we are able to develop an effective vaccine, then since the virus is not evolving very much, the vaccine would be effective, and it would be effective for years together. Every year we won't have to hunt for a new vaccine as we are doing for influenza. Over.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Nivedita. We have quite a few questions pouring in, and what I heard from the admin is that we have a few hundred viewers, both through the website as well as on YouTube. Of course, if you want to send a question, you have to register and send it in. So please send it in through the chat or text Dr. Ravi Gaur, since it's publicly available. But the first question on the new kits and the new products that are available. This is actually for Mr. Suresh Vazirani. We have a question from the audience about the new factory. And again, this is something which we've discussed this a couple of days ago, sir, that was created quite quickly. So can you share a little bit about the new factory that you have developed for this?
Yes, sure, Shravan. Even though in India we have been able to scale up testing to pretty high level, but if you still look at the statistics, it's still a minute number. So I think in next few months, there'll be a huge requirement for a lot more testing. In my rough estimate, I think we have to scale up testing at least 5x in next 3 months. So whether it's RT-PCR or whether antigen testing, of course, antibody testing hasn't really started. As Shravan, you mentioned that in USA, they are doing 10 lakh antibody tests a day, just in the US. About equal amount in Europe. Why antibody testing is so important? Because the countries realize that, as our Prime Minister Modi also mentioned, that the choice between Jaan and Jahan, of course, is very important. You need the Jaan first before you can think of Jahan. But now that we know that most of the people are going to live, so Jaan is going to be there. Now it's time to think about Jahan. How do we get our economy kick-started? We have had almost 4 or 5 months of total stoppage. How do we get the economy going? How do we get the people's life going to keep feeding them? So this, I feel, is where the antibody test comes, which, as you know, in Europe, they call it like immunity passport. So with the antibody, if you are positive, normally positive is a bad word, but for antibody, positive is a good word. So if you're antibody positive, you're a lucky guy. So as I say that if you're antibody positive, you have the confidence that you can go out and get to work, be a productive member of the society and the country. And this is where I said that Europe and America are doing huge testing of antibodies so that people gain the confidence and feel safe. They can go about life, they can go to work, go to the factories. So in this respect, I feel for a country of our size, I think we should be doing, if not at least 10 lakh tests per day, antibody tests. Now, where will that come from? Where will that come from? So this is where our new factory comes in, which, as you mentioned, that is the largest factory dedicated for COVID tests. This is meant only for COVID tests. And it will be operational by 15th of August. And I believe that with this one, India can really be Atmanirbhar in terms of all the COVID testing, whether it's RT-PCR, antibody test, antigen test, rapid test. So we'll be producing all of this and totally integrated right from the raw materials. So it's to be a great day of India to become totally Atmanirbhar. Thank you, Shah.
Thank you, sir. Indeed, an auspicious day, and all the very best from all of us. And now I have another question related to what you said about being able to test millions of individuals a day and empowering patients or indeed eventually consumers to be able to get this test done. Ravi, I have a question for you on we've been hearing about the potential for saliva sample collection. Mr. Vazirani also spoke about the immunity passport, which has been a contentious point over the last several weeks, because we need to understand what the results tell us, both for an individual as well as for a population, and indeed perhaps for a factory or any other contained zone. So could you share a little bit of your views about how to make this accessible through different testing, sampling methodologies, Ravi?
Yes, I think, Shravan, one of the important thing, if you really want to augment the capacity and make this capacity testing to the last first, probably, I think sample type is going to play a very, very important role. And that's where I think there have been studies which are working on saliva testing. I think Dr. Nivedita, ICMR, probably as representing here, the government should actually consider that maybe because saliva is a very, anything you can take a saliva, spit into a container and ship it anywhere you want. That could be a home collection model, it could be a self-collection model and saliva. Results have been, the people have been working on it, they're trying to correlate in studies, but it's a very important, I think, there's a time probably where we fast and aggressive on that. If we can come out with the protocol and the advisories from the ICMR, how does it work? Where do we fit in? Should we do a pilot study of this? I think that will definitely help, I think, the apprehension in people's mind because the sample collection of RT-PCR, even it's a cumbersome process. It requires a lot of because PPE, people going, and the collection errors are also there. But if this saliva can be done, which can be under the home setting in a container, sealed and shipped across, and which can be stable to any temperature, I think that will probably be a big help. And I think we definitely results have been seen, shown some positivity. It's not like they're not working, and that really can address the challenges what we're facing with RT-PCR. That's one. Second is the immunity passport. I think as we go ahead, I think all of us are under a lot of stress over the last 3 months, 4 months, and we still don't know what's going to happen. I think as the diagnostic is coming, treatment is becoming better, but I think peace of mind is very, very important. So if for that purpose, what Ms. Vazirani also mentioned about, but I'm talking about immunity, am I going to be, immune to reinfection? Or I am still have a less virus, or I'm still shedding virus? Can I have an immunity passport? And can I be safe to discontinue prevention measures? I think that is now going to be the next step because the treatment part is already almost getting stabilized. The testing part is almost all spectrums are getting covered, all geographies are getting covered, but the anxious minds have to be classified. And that's where I think serology is really going to be a very important role. And let's consider that although it's nothing like immunity passport, but sooner or later it has peace of mind has to come to the patient's mind, and that should be considered definitely.
Thank you very much, Ravi. Excellent points, especially on the saliva self-sampling. This can empower our consumers and empower our patients and give them better access, wider access to the test. Of course, as Dr. Nivedita and some other speakers had pointed out, being a pandemic, we do need to be aware of how to manage epidemiological data and provide that to the authorities. And this immunity passport also is not fully understood. I think we need to be very clear about that as well. And there are various protocols, I believe, that are being developed in other countries, which I'm sure we will also be considering. Now, the next question is a bit provocative. This I'm going to turn it to Narendra and also maybe get a word from Dr. Nivedita. Is around quality of tests, and the question reads: with the onset of fear-mongering process, many new fly-by-night players are claiming to be the testing solution providers for rapid tests. So the question is around quality. And are there any SOPs or benchmark protocols that we maintain for quality? So I want to ask this question in different ways. One from a global manufacturer such as yourself, Narendra. What are the benchmarks that you follow for quality? And also, if Dr. Nivedita has an opinion on what the government sees as the ideal benchmarks. After which we probably have time for just maybe one more quick question before we close. Narendra.
Thanks, Shravan, and thank you for the question. I think it's a very important one at this point in time because there are many tests out there in the market, right? And just the way with the rapid antigen test, the rapid antibody test, there was poor sensitivity, specificity in the beginning, and that led to a lot of chaos on whether antibody tests in itself have value or not. Antibody tests have a lot of value, and been proved, or maybe you've seen it getting adopted all across Europe, in Singapore, in US. But that whole mindset had to be changed because of the kind of tests that were initially launched with the rapid antibody. Now, that's where the quality is very important. While selecting a test, it is very important you select a test with high sensitivity, with high specificity. We are still trying to understand the prevalence that is in the country. And that's why at this point of time, we have to be even more careful not to create chaos by having a lot of false positives or false negatives, because that would impact the kind of decisions you would make based on the diagnostic test that you've got, right? So the situation is very different to a regular situation where we have to make sure the accuracy of the test is very good. So that's where quality does play a huge role. At the same time, just to add on this, with the antibody testing, especially with the IgG testing, Vivek also mentioned about this will help to take significant decisions when we want to run the vaccine program on who needs to be vaccinated, who should get it first, or when it comes to even convalescent plasma therapy, or when it comes to, say, an individual wanting to know that he was in a hotspot area, or he has been close, he got to know that the family he was close to had the virus previously. So to check the person's immunity status, or just to get an idea on a personal level, if you had contracted the virus and you were asymptomatic. So there are a lot of different applications, and as Vazirani sir said before, we really have to ramp up the testing to make sure
I can't tell if I'm the only one who's not able to hear Narendra anymore, but look, thank you. Thank you. But I think he has covered the bulk of the points, and I'll hand it back for closing to Dr. Nivedita. The views of the ICMR, both in terms of quality, as the person had asked, and also there was a related question, as the corona positive cases have been increasing tremendously over the last few weeks, the government has also unlocked the economy. So could you share your views on that, the thinking of the unlock down? And we'll close with that. Maybe if you could, I know it's tough, but if you could answer that in a minute and a half, please.
Yeah, so quickly, like we as far as quality of testing kits is concerned, when we started in March, we had only 1 or 2. But we have now more than 200 indigenous manufacturers who have been handheld by various departments, and now they are ready for production and supplies to the country. The cost of testing in terms of molecular diagnostics has really come down. So this is one welcome initiative. But simultaneously, we need to be very cognizant that we should not compromise on the quality. So ICMR has set up, along with DBT and CSIR, 16 validation centers who are working tirelessly day and night to validate these kits as per standardized protocols which we have developed, and even the batch testing protocols are in place along with DCGI. So we are very cognizant of the quality and we are working on that aspect. But simultaneously, we, as has been reiterated again and again, that we need to be careful on which test we are using when. So as of now, we are recommending molecular test, antigen-based test, and IgG antibody tests. There's still debate on use of IgM antibody tests, rapid or total antibody tests, because they have altogether different implications. We should remember anybody who's IgM positive can be infectious, and the public health strategies to tackle that individual are completely different. Whereas IgG is looked as an immunity passport, though with lot of caveats. So the kind of interpretation that we can have by using IgM, total antibody, IgG are completely different. So we should be very cognizant of what test we are using when. I could have gone into a lot of details explaining, but I understand there is paucity of time. So I will just stop here.
Dr. Nivedita, this is excellent. Thank you very much for closing on that note. Clearly, we've gone a long way in the last 3-4 months in this journey, from one lab that was offering testing to thousands of labs, and from one testing methodology to several. So thank you, Vicky, for this opportunity for us to engage in this discussion, which is on a very critical topic for the country at this time. And with the changes in policy over the last 48 hours, I believe we do have the arsenal to win this battle. Our success in managing the pandemic will be critical to regaining confidence and ensuring the recovery of our economy. Once again, a big thank you to the panelists and to the audience for joining us for this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Shravan.
And thank you, Shravan.
Thank you, Shravan. Thank you, everyone.
I think it was one of the most interesting and informative sessions, and I'm sure the delegates too enjoyed. And thank you so much for moderating the session very beautifully. Thank you, panelists, and thank you, delegates, for joining us.